Let me be direct with you from the outset, because the situation unfolding in Baghdad demands directness. What we are witnessing is not a diplomatic suggestion. It is not a negotiating position. It is not another round of empty posturing from a weak government trying to appease domestic critics. What we are witnessing is the Iraqi government issuing a hard deadline for complete American military withdrawal, and that deadline is June 30th, 2026. 73 days from today, I am sitting here looking at a ministerial directive that was leaked to Al Mayadeen and subsequently confirmed by 3 separate Iraqi government sources in the past 48 hours. What it shows is not a request for partial drawdown. It is not a proposal for renegotiating basing rights. It is not a suggestion for reducing troop levels gradually over several years. What it shows is a formal parliamentary resolution demanding complete withdrawal of all 2,500 American troops currently stationed in Iraq, with enforcement mechanisms included by the end of June. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this deadline is different from every previous Iraqi demand for American withdrawal, why the Biden administration cannot ignore it the way previous administrations ignored similar demands, and why what happens in Baghdad over the next 73 days will determine American positioning across the entire Middle East for the next decade. This analysis is based on parliamentary records, leaked diplomatic cables, and direct statements from Iraqi officials that most American media outlets are simply not reporting. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively discussed in emergency meetings at the Pentagon and the State Department right now. Let's start with the geography and political structure of Iraq, because context matters when understanding why this moment is fundamentally different from 2008, 2011, or even 2020. Iraq is not a unified country in any meaningful military sense. It is a confederation of competing power centers held together by an extremely fragile political arrangement called the National Framework Alliance. The American military presence in Iraq currently consists of approximately 2,500 troops distributed across 3 primary installations. The largest concentration is at Ain al-Assad Air Base in Anbar Province, with roughly 900 personnel. The second major installation is at Erbil Air Base in Iraqi Kurdistan, with approximately 700 troops. The remainder are scattered between Baghdad International Airport, the Union 3 base near Baghdad, and several smaller advisory positions embedded with Iraqi security forces. To put that in perspective, at the height of the Iraq War in 2007, the United States maintained over 160,000 troops in country. Even during the so-called advisory mission from 2012 to 2014, American troop levels hovered between 8,000 and 15,000. The current force of 2,500 represents the absolute minimum footprint the Pentagon believes is necessary to maintain what they call operational awareness and counter ISIS capabilities. That number matters because it means the United States has almost no flexibility for further reductions without complete withdrawal. According to reporting by the New Arab and confirmed by multiple Iraqi parliamentary sources, the resolution demanding American withdrawal passed the Iraqi Council of Representatives on April 14, 2026, by a vote of 170 to 63. This was not a symbolic measure. This was a binding legislative act under Article 61 of the Iraqi Constitution, which grants Parliament the authority to approve or terminate international agreements, including security arrangements with foreign powers. Dr. Hakim al-Zamili, chairman of the Iraqi Parliament's Security and Defense Committee, stated publicly on April 15th, and I am quoting him directly here, the American military presence in Iraq is no longer justifiable under any legal framework. The so-called anti-ISIS mission ended when ISIS territorial control was eliminated in 2017. What remains is an occupation force operating without consent of the Iraqi people or legal authorization from their elected representatives. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of analysis anywhere else. Now let's talk about what changed between the previous withdrawal demands and this one, because understanding that shift explains why June 30th is a real deadline, not political theater. Announcement number 1, the political composition of Iraq's government has fundamentally shifted in ways that make American military presence untenable. And this one matters more than anything else because it determines whether Iraq has the political will to actually enforce this deadline. Between 2014 and 2022, Iraq's government was led by figures who, while occasionally critical of American presence, ultimately depended on Washington for political survival. Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi and his successor, Adil Abdul Mahdi, both maintained channels with American officials that allowed for quiet accommodation even when public rhetoric was hostile. That arrangement is over. The current Prime Minister, Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, came to power in October 2022 through an alliance that included the Sadrist movement, the Fatah Alliance, which represents Iranian-backed popular mobilization forces, and the State of Law Coalition. According to analysis by the Carnegie Middle East Center, this coalition represents the first Iraqi government since 2003 in which pro-Iranian parties hold an absolute governing majority without requiring support from Kurdish or secular parties that historically aligned with Washington. The voting breakdown on the withdrawal resolution demonstrates this shift clearly. Every single member of the Fatah alliance voted for immediate withdrawal. 78% of Sadrist movement representatives voted for withdrawal. Even 41% of the State of Law Coalition, which historically maintained pragmatic relations with the United States, voted for the measure. The only substantial opposition came from Kurdish representatives and a small bloc of secular Baghdad politicians. Muqtada al-Sadr himself, who commands the single largest political bloc in Iraq and controls an estimated 60,000 militia fighters through Saraya al-Salam, issued a statement on April 16th that should be understood as a direct threat. He said, and I am quoting, "If American forces remain in Iraq beyond June 30th, the resistance has every right to treat them as hostile occupation forces and respond accordingly. The blood of martyrs will be on American hands, not ours." Received. That is announcement number one. Announcement number two, the security situation has shifted in ways that make the American justification for remaining in Iraq completely indefensible. This is the part even some American military officials have quietly acknowledged in background briefings. The original justification for maintaining American troops in Iraq after the 2011 withdrawal was the reemergence of ISIS in 2014. That justification made sense when ISIS controlled Mosul, Ramadi, Fallujah, and one-third of Iraqi territory. It made sense when ISIS was generating $60 million per month from oil smuggling and controlled a population of 8 million people. It does not make sense today. According to data published by the Institute for the Study of War and confirmed by United Nations monitoring reports, ISIS territorial control in Iraq has been effectively zero since December 2017. Current ISIS presence consists of an estimated 2,000 to 3,000 fighters operating in small cells primarily in rural areas of Kirkuk, Diyala, and northern Salah ad-Din provinces. These are not forces capable of seizing cities or governing territory. They are an insurgency conducting sporadic attacks that kill between 15 and 30 Iraqi security personnel per month. Stay with me, because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the gap between American rhetoric and Iraqi reality becomes impossible to ignore. The Iraqi security forces currently number approximately 300,000 active personnel, including the Army, Federal Police, and counterterrorism units. The Popular Mobilization Forces add another 140,000 fighters. According to a leaked Pentagon assessment obtained by The Intercept in March 2026, American military advisors rated Iraqi security forces as capable of containing ISIS without direct American combat support. The assessment concluded, and I am quoting from the document, ISF can maintain current operational tempo against ISIS remnants indefinitely without U.S. ground presence. Air support and intelligence sharing remain valuable but not existential. And that assessment is critical because it undermines the entire American justification for maintaining boots on the ground. If Iraqi forces can handle ISIS without American troops physically stationed in Iraq, then the mission has succeeded and the troops should leave. The fact that they have not left suggests the mission was never primarily about ISIS. Announcement number 3, and this one almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting correctly, the regional security architecture has evolved in ways that make continued American military presence in Iraq strategically irrelevant. Iran has won the competition for influence in Iraq, and that victory is now irreversible through military means. Between 2003 and 2011, the United States spent over $800 billion and sacrificed 4,500 American lives attempting to build an Iraqi government that would align with Washington rather than Tehran. That project failed completely. According to diplomatic cables published by WikiLeaks and reporting by the New York Times, Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani, before his assassination in January 2020, exercised more influence over Iraqi security policy than any American official. Even after Soleimani's death, Iranian influence in Iraq has not declined. It has institutionalized. The Popular Mobilization Forces, which are legally part of Iraq's security structure, receive funding, training, and operational direction from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. According to research published by the European Council on Foreign Relations, at least 40,000 PMF fighters have direct operational ties to Iranian command structures. These are not militias. They are official Iraqi government forces with Iranian loyalties. The Iranian land corridor connecting Tehran to Damascus through Iraq is now fully operational. According to flight tracking data analyzed by Air Wars and confirmed by Syrian opposition sources, Iranian military cargo flights transit Iraqi airspace an average of 12 times per week, carrying weapons, ammunition, and personnel to Syria and Lebanon. The Iraqi government does not intercept these flights. In many cases, Iraqi officials coordinate them. Think carefully about what this represents. When the United States maintains a military presence in a country where the government itself is facilitating Iranian military logistics, that is not a strategic asset. That is a liability. American troops in Iraq are not countering Iranian influence. They are sitting in the middle of Iranian influence with no ability to change it. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are two stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. The public story is about ISIS and counterterrorism partnerships. The real story is about American unwillingness to accept the loss of Iraq as a strategic asset and the sunk cost fallacy driving continued presence despite zero prospect of reversing Iranian dominance. The Biden administration's official response to the Iraqi withdrawal deadline has been carefully worded evasion. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, in a statement released April 17th, said the United States remains committed to, quote, the bilateral security partnership with Iraq and will continue consultations with Iraqi leaders on the appropriate structure and timeline for the ongoing mission. That statement does not acknowledge the parliamentary resolution. It does not recognize June 30th as a deadline. It treats the Iraqi government's formal legislative action as an opening negotiating position rather than a legal requirement. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Dana Strahl stated in congressional testimony on April 18th that American troops in Iraq provide, quote, essential intelligence sharing, logistical coordination, and air support that Iraqi forces continue to request and rely upon. She did not mention that the parliamentary resolution demanding withdrawal passed by a 2-to-1 margin. She did not address the fact that the Iraqi Prime Minister publicly endorsed the resolution the day after it passed. Think carefully about what this represents. When a sovereign government passes binding legislation demanding foreign troops leave, and that foreign government responds by ignoring the legislation and continuing consultations as if nothing happened, that is not a partnership. That is not mutual agreement. That is an occupation continuing despite explicit legal termination of authorization. The historical parallel here is exact, and anyone familiar with Cold War history will recognize it immediately. Between 1979 and 1989, the Soviet Union maintained military forces in Afghanistan, despite escalating Afghan demands for withdrawal, despite international condemnation, and despite mounting Soviet casualties. The Soviet justification was protecting the Afghan government from insurgent threats and maintaining regional stability. The reality was that Moscow could not accept the strategic loss of Afghanistan and the admission that Soviet blood and treasure had been spent for nothing. The United States is walking the exact same path in Iraq. American policymakers cannot accept that the Iraq War, which cost 4,491 American lives, $800 billion, and destroyed America's international credibility, ended in complete strategic failure. Admitting that Iraq is now effectively an Iranian client state means admitting the entire project was a catastrophic waste. So, instead, they maintain 2,500 troops in advisory roles, pretending that counter-ISIS operations justify presence, while the actual government of Iraq operates as an extension of Iranian regional strategy. Sparta and Athens fought the Peloponnesian War from 431 to 404 BC. 27 years of brutal conflict that devastated both powers economically, militarily, and politically. Both sides believed they were fighting for survival and regional dominance. Both sides committed atrocities. Both sides sacrificed entire generations of young men, and who emerged as the dominant power in the Greek world when the war finally ended? Neither Sparta nor Athens. It was Macedon, which stayed out of the war, built its strength quietly, and then swept in under Philip II and later Alexander the Great to dominate the entire region. The United States is Athens. Iran is Sparta. Iraq is the battleground. And China is Macedon, quietly building economic and diplomatic relationships across the Middle East while Washington and Tehran exhaust themselves in endless proxy conflicts and influence competitions. The parallel is exact, so where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths, because there is no honest middle ground here, and each path leads to radically different outcomes. Path 1, the United States complies with the Iraqi parliamentary resolution and withdraws all troops by June 30th. This is the outcome Iraqi politicians are demanding, Iranian officials are expecting, and most regional analysts consider the only legal option under international law. If this happens, the Biden administration will frame it as a planned transition consistent with mission completion against ISIS. They will emphasize ongoing intelligence sharing and over-the-horizon capabilities. They will claim this represents Iraqi sovereignty and successful partnership. In reality, it will represent the final American strategic defeat in Iraq and the complete loss of military leverage in Iraqi politics. Iranian influence will expand without any American counterbalance. The land corridor from Tehran to Damascus will operate without even symbolic American monitoring. And every other American partner in the region will understand that parliamentary pressure can successfully expel American forces. Path 2, the United States refuses to withdraw and continues operating bases in Iraq despite parliamentary termination of legal authorization. This is the path the Biden administration appears to be pursuing based on their public statements, deflecting rather than acknowledging the deadline. If this happens, Iraqi militias aligned with Iran will begin targeting American forces through rocket attacks, drone strikes, and roadside bombings. We have already seen preliminary versions of this. According to Pentagon data, American forces in Iraq faced 63 attacks between October 2023 and January 2024 during the Gaza conflict. Those attacks stopped when diplomatic pressure secured a temporary calm. If American troops remain past June 30th in defiance of parliamentary will, those attacks will resume and escalate. The United States will then face an impossible choice. Either accept regular casualties to maintain a symbolic presence that achieves nothing strategically, or launch retaliatory strikes against Iraqi militias that are legally part of the Iraqi government, which would constitute acts of war against the very government America claims to be supporting. Both options are catastrophic. Path 3, and this is the one I think is most likely, though least discussed, the United States proposes a cosmetic restructuring that technically complies with withdrawal demands while maintaining operational presence through reclassification. Move some troops to embassy security assignments, redesignate others as training contractors, relocate certain units to Kurdistan, and claim those are governed by separate agreements with the Kurdish regional government rather than Baghdad. This path allows Biden to claim compliance while maintaining actual presence. It gives Iraqi politicians partial victory to show their constituents. It preserves some American intelligence access and operational capability. But it is also the path most likely to generate long-term instability because it satisfies nobody fully and leaves both Iraqi nationalists and American hawks feeling betrayed. I think we are closer to path 3 than the headlines suggest. The Biden administration cannot afford a complete Middle East withdrawal in an election year, especially after the Afghanistan evacuation disaster. Iraqi politicians need to show their constituents they delivered on sovereignty promises, but also want to avoid total confrontation with Washington. So both sides will likely accept a face-saving compromise that technically meets the letter of withdrawal demands while preserving some American presence under different labels. But here is what that compromise will not change. Iran has won the competition for influence in Iraq. That victory is irreversible through any level of American military presence. The question is whether American policymakers can accept that reality and adjust strategy accordingly, or whether they will continue pretending that 2,500 advisors can somehow balance 140,000 Iranian-aligned militia forces operating as official Iraqi government units. Here are the questions I want you to take away from this analysis. Does the United States have any legal or moral justification for remaining in Iraq after a sovereign parliament votes for withdrawal? Can American troops operate effectively in a country where the government itself facilitates Iranian military logistics? And what message does American defiance of Iraqi sovereignty send to every other partner nation watching how Washington treats allied governments that make inconvenient decisions? Tell me in the comments what you think the Biden administration actually does when June 30th arrives. Tell me if you think American troops will actually be gone by the deadline, or whether we will see another round of reclassification and restructuring that maintains presence under different names. We will keep tracking every development in Baghdad, Erbil, and Washington as this deadline approaches. That is what this channel does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand what is actually happening in Iraq beyond the sanitized briefings and official statements. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, because when June 30th arrives, the gap between American rhetoric and Iraqi reality will become impossible to ignore. We will see you in the next analysis.